This episode of No Time Like Joe Time is sponsored by Fate in Flames on Kindle Vella. Rena has grown up sheltered and cut off from the world, caring for her ailing mother. When fate catches up with her, she is thrust into a world of magic and intrigue she never knew existed, and the heritage she is not quite sure of. Read Fate in Flames on Kindle Vella.
Welcome to No Time Like Joe Time, where TV gets deep for no reason. I'm Generic Joe, here to say the same thing each time before you listen to an episode. You can find No Time Like Joe Time wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm just that generous and kind of a guy. Please rate, please like, subscribe, and comment, because I'm magic. It also really helps grow the show, and I love the conversations I'm having. So maybe you can help your old friend Joe. Now, if you, and I mean just you, want to be a guest, you can email me at notimelikejoetime@gmail.com. Love to have you on, figure out what show you like, and then we'll have a meaningful discussion. All right, let's get to the episode.
Like what you are listening to? Check out Lighten on Spotify Music, a new and upcoming local band from Minnesota.
Welcome to No Time Like Joe Time, where TV gets deep for no reason. Each week I take a show and I watch it to find some wisdom and yada, yada, yada. Each week I bring on a new guest to talk about wisdom with me. What is the deal with that? This week, my guest is an executive coach, helping people create the kind of impact they want to see in their lives. You can find her on Instagram, which we'll have in the notes right there, and keep an eye open for pop-up trainings she does about leadership. Please welcome Lisa Darr. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Well, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit. You do, I saw on Facebook, you do something called open office hours, which I thought was awesome because there will never be enough leadership tools out there, I think. And I'm just curious, what kind of got you into leadership? And you have a lot of really good views on leadership, which I'd love for you to share with us.
Yeah, well, actually it was, I'm thinking of the movie Bad Boss or Bad Boss.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, so when I reflect back on what brought me to where I am now, it was because I experienced a lot of poor leadership. And to be honest, Joe, I think, early on in my career, I didn't realize that that was called leadership because we often called those people managers, right?
Yeah.
So, and over my career, I started to learn about the distinction between managers and leaders. And I really got passionate about leadership because I love business. And I feel like a lot of businesses are based on some idea about something that somebody had that they wanted to change the world with. And however, sometimes organizations struggle because they don't have strong leadership. And I think we see that with, when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, people would say people don't leave their job, like people leave like bad managers, right? It's not, a lot of times people aren't leaving their job because they're unhappy with their work. They actually have a very difficult work environment, right? Or somebody who's not supporting them or somebody who's not helping them grow. And I really want to be somebody that can be an agent for change to help people to realize that things could be done differently and better. And in particular, we live in a world now that is moving so quickly, is so complex, so complicated, that the world of a leader is a challenging place to be. And I really want to help people to develop themselves into the best version of who they can be as a leader, and subsequently to be able to help organizations achieve what it is that they want and create the kind of change that they want in the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love what you're saying about like, difference between manager and leader. You as you were talking, it kind of reminded, I was listening to this guy talk about, he was talking to like Navy SEALs or just the elite soldiers in the army. And it was talking about, well, how do you pick who gets on the team? And they're like, we kind of have this chart.
Mhm.
One side is your skill. Do I trust you with my life? But on the other side, it's character. Do I trust you with my wife? And they're like, we always kind of find it like in the, like, yeah, we want them to be skilled, but we also have to have them trustworthy. And so often in business, it's just about the skill and not about those other like soft skills. Do you feel like things are kind of changing where like people are starting to be more aware between manager and leadership, or do you still feel like it's a battle?
It's definitely getting there, Joe. I mean, it's obviously a paradigm that will take some time to shift.
Hmm.
Certainly now I've seen that evolution from that sort of command and control type of leadership
Hmm.
to one which is much more what we call transformational leadership, where it's about leaders who are visionary, who actually inspire and motivate people to, take initiative, and to be involved in the running of the business, so to speak. Right? It's not,
Hmm.
people have the opportunity to bring ideas. They're empowered to make changes within their organization. And I think absolutely, one of the things that's helped with that is all the research that's out there, right? And sort of the big influencers like the Adam Grants of the world,
Yes.
Amy Edmondson, right? Simon Sinek, right? All of these big names that are out there saying, hey, like leaders, you know what? Like you've got to care for more than just the results or the bottom line. But it's and I always talk about my definition of manager versus leader is that a
Hmm.
manager gets things done by people, a leader gets things done through people.
Hmm.
And I think it's a very important distinction because one is very transactional and one, when done well, is actually very transformational.
Yeah, I love that. And I love like when people start seeing what can be with this format, others will follow. And it doesn't just happen in business, it happens all over. So like a revolutionary show was Seinfeld. And a lot of shows were like, oh, it was, it was a crazy concept of nothing and just what it did. And so like I kind of love that idea, which brings us to our show we're gonna talk about. So what is your history with Seinfeld and why did you pick it for this?
Oh my gosh. I just, it's what you said, Joe. When it first came out, I don't think it had much of a following. Like it was sort of
Yeah.
a bit of a sleeper kind of
Mm.
show that all of a sudden kind of permeated itself, over time. But what I loved about it was, in general, when I look at the really brilliant comedians, they have this way of actually looking at life, in a very discerning way to say, people, look at what you're doing, look at how you're
Mhm.
behaving. And so, the one thing that I always loved about Seinfeld is that it seemed like so many life situations
Yes.
were like a Seinfeld episode. Like I would say that a lot around my friends. I go like, oh my God, that's a Seinfeld episode.
Oh
So I've
gosh.
been watching it from the very beginning when I
Mhm.
think it, was not quite as polished, right? And it just
Yeah.
first came out, like you said, it was kind of this kind of weird concept, right? Like, and they sort of poked fun at it even in the show, right? It's a show about nothing in a
Yeah.
way, right? But it actually is about taking life and putting it under the microscope and um poking fun at it.
Yes. Yeah, kind of looking at situations and the ridiculousness. Yeah, I've watched some Seinfeld episodes. I'd love to go back now I'm a little older and rewatch them because as I was looking for clips, like these I was just like, "Oh my gosh, was it always this funny?" Because ah, and but yeah, so and I like the setup because this first one definitely takes a bad situation, kind of makes it funny.
Yes.
So to set it up, Jerry just had his car stolen. And so they're kind of talking about it, and something unfolds with it. And we'll watch the clip and then talk about it from there.
They stole my car. Who did? They did. What, is there more than just one? What should I do? Should I call the police? What are they gonna do? You know, I better call the car phone company, cancel my service.
Maybe you should call your car phone.
Yeah. He's probably driving it right now.
Wait a minute, call the car phone, see what happens.
Are you serious?
Yeah, go ahead, call.
I don't even know if I remember the number. What do I say if he picks up? Hello? Hello? Is this 555-8383?
Have no idea.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Did you steal my car?
Yes, I did.
You did?
I did.
But that's my car.
I didn't know it was yours.
What are you gonna do with it?
I don't know. Drive around?
Then can I have it back?
No, I'm gonna keep it.
Hello?
Yeah, who's this?
Kramer.
Hello, Kramer.
Listen, there's a pair of gloves in the glove compartment.
Wait, hold it. Brown ones?
Yeah. Listen, could you mail those to me? Or bring them by my building. It's 129 West 81st Street.
129. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Here's Jerry. Gloves. Hello?
Jerry?
Yeah, let me ask you a question. How do you cross those wires?
I didn't cross any wires. The keys were in it.
Sid left the keys in the car. All right, I gotta go. Drive carefully.
Hey, Jerry, when's the last time you had a tune-up? Because I can't find the...
What made me laugh about this? So about a year and a half ago, I brought my car. I was driving my car. It just stopped working. Tried to start it, couldn't get anything to go. So I had to get it towed to a car shop. And I missed the call from the auto shop telling me my car got stolen. And I got a call from the an insurance company saying, hey, I want to talk to you about your stolen car. And I'm like, this clearly is a scam. So I called the car place, and I've gone there a lot of times. I'm like, hey, Kelly, it's Joe. You know, hey, I'm sorry even to ask this. You take great care of my car, and I know you would never let anything happen, but I just got to double check. Did my car get stolen? He was like, yeah. I was like, oh. And first I felt terrible because I was sitting here being like, oh, you would never let anything like that happen. And then the other thing, I was like, how did they start the car? Because he was like, yeah, we didn't fix it. I'm like, but so yeah, I just love this idea of like something bad and just like seeing kind of the ridiculousn's in it and seeing some humor. What were some of your takeaways?
Well, it it was funny because George is like, George is usually one that they ridicule the most, right? Like, and he was like, well, you have a car, like it was so obvious, right? Because he goes, do you have a car phone in there? Yeah, well, why don't you call it? Right?
Yeah.
And then Kramer was
Yeah.
like, it wasn't even like it was a big deal, but he worried about his gloves. So it's like, he's like, oh yeah, are there gloves in there? And then the guy was like, sort of casually like, well, why'd you take it? Oh, I don't know. What are you gonna do? I just drive around, like, because you do sort of wonder, like, in a way, like, what do people do with this? Like, why did they want to steal a car? Right. Like, right. Like, because, I guess a lot of times if it's younger people, they're joyriding if they don't have one, right? Like, so, but yeah, and I think there's there's always that underlying theme in Seinfeld where it's like, well, you can really take it seriously or you could not. right?
Yeah.
Right, like how seriously are we going to take these things in life, right?
Yeah.
Because in the end he kind of goes, yeah, drive carefully.
Yeah. I love. Yeah, and one thing it kind of reminds me of is I was watching this clip of like a judge, was kind of talking to people about what they were here for, and one guy comes up and she's like, "Okay, you are like accused of stealing a Miami jersey, Miami Dolphins jersey," and she looks up and he's wearing a Dolphins jersey. And but yeah, I do like your point of like, why do people steal? Because it's like, yeah, sometimes it's probably like I have no other option. But I remember years ago, it was either early 2000s or before, Renault Renola Ryder. I don't think that's quite her name. She's in Stranger Things.
Oh yeah, Winona Ryder.
Yeah, she had the scandal where she stole tons of stuff
Oh,
and obviously had the money to pay for it. And so just like, I don't know, it's kind of, I don't know if that's what they were going for, but it's kind of funny to look. I don't know why I did it.
well, and you know what? So there's another episode. I don't know if you remember this one, but it was something about, I think Jerry had his car valeted or something, and whoever had valeted had really bad BO.
Yeah.
He couldn't get rid of it.
Yeah.
And he was like, he was trying and trying and trying. It's like, oh my God. He said, it's like an entity. He said, it just won't leave. He couldn't exercise it. And so at the end of the show, you see him like the car's parked and the windows open, and Jerry goes, and he sees a guy walking along, and he takes his keys and he throws them into the car like it's obvious that he's just thrown his keys in the car. So this guy goes, oh, car, right? He steals it. And then you see him right at the end go, like all of a sudden the odor of the car hits him and he looks like he's gonna gag.
Oh my gosh. I don't remember that part, but I saw a little bit of it. Oh, that's awesome. I like to think that's kind of what happened when they took my car, like because they did find it not too far.
Oh,
And like they were like, aha, I got it. Boom. And yeah, just it's such a, I don't know. I did another podcast about like not taking things too seriously, because even though it was a pain in the butt to deal with a stolen car, I found it wildly amusing because just the whole like mess up of I'm making this poor guy mechanic like saying all this nice stuff, and he has to be the one who's like, no, it did get stolen. And then
what kind of car was it, Joe?
it was a Chrysler 2012, 13, somewhere around there. And just I'm like, I legit would love to ask the thieves, what'd you do? Because if I could have driven it that far, I could have got it to the auto shop and could have saved me some money. So,
and then I guess I wonder now, with all the modern technology, is it more difficult or easier to steal a vehicle, right? Because now you've got car alarms, but then the car alarm goes off and people kind of ignore it, right?
Yeah.
And now you have push start ignitions, right? So they don't cross wires like they were talking about in the show, right? And I don't know, like then that goes into a whole thing. I don't know about in the US, but in Canada where I am, there's a huge thing now about cars getting stolen and being shipped overseas.
Oh.
And, yeah, like being found like in Africa or something like that, right?
Wow.
Because, they're like, they ship them in these like containers, right? And they're all like, most of them are high-end luxury vehicles, right? Like it'll be like a Lexus or a BMW or a Mercedes or something like that. But it's like, I guess what they can do is, I think they said they clone the car fob or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to your point, if they're that smart, it's unfortunate that they can't use that smart for good.
I know. I was talking to somebody today. So I work as a peer support specialist. So I work with people who are going through crisis, and I use my past mental health crisis to kind of give them hope. And so the guy I was meeting with, he asked if I could drop him off at Cub Foods, and I'm like, yeah, of course. And he lives in a very tough neighborhood, and we walked outside, and there was a guy walking by and held the door for him, but he's like, oh, I'm not going in. We're like, oh, cool. And he goes, yeah, I'm feeling blue. And I'm like, oh, hey, sorry, man. And the guy I was with, he's like, come on, Joe, let's just go. I'm like, I want to talk to him. So we get in the car, and the guy goes, no, that's code for he's selling drugs. And I'm like, what? and like he was telling me the scheme they have, and I'm like, if they could translate that to an actual business, they could, I mean, they are running a business essentially, and it's like trying to help them see like, no, you can keep doing what you're doing, but you can do it in a way that's good. I mean, I mean, that guy, he's very approachable and easy to talk with. And so it's like, well, hey, you could get into sales. You could say, hey, watch how easy it is for me to steal your car.
Yeah,
And
or
just
sell you some drugs.
yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Joe, because there's a researcher, his name is Dan Ariely. He one of the books that I read was one called Predictably Irrational. He's
Mhm.
actually, I believe, a social economist. And what's interesting, he's actually, when he was at the University of Chicago, he actually
Mhm.
did some research exactly on what you're talking about on
Yeah.
drug dealers, right? Because I
Yeah.
guess there are parts of Chicago that are really, really rough,
Mhm.
right? And he actually talked about why the kid on the corner that was selling pot or whatever they were selling was not really making that much money because the head of this whole thing, to your point, was actually an African American guy that had graduated with a BCom and was running the whole enterprise.
Wow.
Yeah, so yes, to your point, as much as we might see a drug dealer,
Mhm.
there's actually a whole other dimension to it, which is yes, it is a business.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's and trying, one thing I've noticed too, working with the people I work with, a lot of them are trying so hard to get their life back together. Because a lot of them, they've been in the criminal justice system, and there's so many barriers they have to jump through that a
Yeah,
lot of times they're like, why am I doing this? It's just going to be easier to go back and sell drugs.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I just, and trying to find, one thing I do try to approach, it's to kind of have a little bit of humor with it because it's such an uncomfortable topic. And I think that's what this Seinfeld does so well. It's just uncomfortable situations.
It is, and I think it also is about how sometimes through humor we can bring those truths to light or the stuff that we, to your point, that we don't want to talk about, right?
Hmm.
We all know about it, but we don't talk about it, right? The
Yeah.
stigma, right, of some of that. And so it's almost like through the channel of humor, it sort of destigmatizes it
Yeah.
in a way, right?
Yeah.
So we all see it, we all
Hmm.
know about it, but no one is courageous enough to actually bring it to the surface and talk about it.
Yeah. And that sets us up actually really perfectly for our next clip about sometimes maybe being too blunt
Yeah.
may not always be the best approach. So this is they're talking in their apartment, and George has a female friend with him, and just we'll just watch what happens.
Oh, I got stamped at the Reggae Lounge last night. Yeah, I'm going back there tonight. I'm not going to pay another cover charge.
Well, you didn't wash all day?
Yeah, I washed, just not the hand. You wouldn't believe the women at this club. Ooh, man.
It's amazing how many beautiful women live in New York. I actually find it kind of intimidating.
Well, you're as pretty as any of them. Just need a nose job.
How can you say something like that?
Why? What do you mean? Well, I just said she needs a nose job. So what?
There's nothing wrong with her nose. God, I'm so sorry, Audrey. It's okay. What did you have to say that for?
Well, I was just trying to help out.
Yeah, well, you can kiss that jacket goodbye, Mr. Von Nozen.
You see what happens when you try to be nice?
I just the reactions of everybody. Jerry's, I think, is my favorite reaction. Just,
Yeah.
and just that's so relatable. 'Cause I've been in situations where you're just like, why did you say that?
Yeah, and you just want to push the words back in your mouth.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. And I I I mean, I think that's I love the idea of, I mean, this could be a whole topic here. If was Kramer being nice by just being like, hey, or was he being inappropriate? I mean, I would side with inappropriate, but there are probably some so I have a lot of Dutch people around me, and they are very quick to be like, yeah, we're pretty hard-headed. So they might look at them and be like, what? I don't get what the big deal is. Actually, I think the perfect example is on Ted Lasso. There's a Dutch player, and he's telling somebody, he's like, yeah, you missed those shots. You should have got it. That wasn't that hard. And the player got mad, and somebody else steps and goes, oh, it's fine. He's just Dutch. And everybody goes, oh, okay.
Well, it's funny that you said that, Joe, because that's what it reminded me of. I was talking to a colleague one time, and she said, well, my husband is Dutch. And she said, when we were getting married, she said, I was in the Netherlands with my future mother-in-law, and we were shopping for a wedding dress. And so she would ask the mother, right, the mother-in-law, what do you think of this one? And she had one on where the mother-in-law goes, that makes you look fat. Right?
Oh my gosh.
But I think too, what you're talking about, Joe, there's social norms, and then there's this whole layer around culture, right? And then I think, for me, from a leadership perspective, there's intent and impact, right?
Yeah.
What was the intent? What was
Yeah.
the impact, right? And what you're, referring to is the impact of, all
Yeah.
the different people. But what's interesting is the woman kind of didn't really she wasn't like overreactive to it, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's funny. I'd actually love to do that. Like, if you were presenting this clip, how would you present it, like, as a leadership tool? Like, how to reframe what Kramer did? I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, that's a great question. So one of the things that comes to mind right away is just recognizing that everyone's going to have a different perspective, and it's neither right nor wrong, right? One, Elaine thinks it's socially inappropriate and mean, right? Jerry's just like, oh dear God, right? And George is like, oh, that's my date, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then the recipient is kind of like, I've kind of heard this before, right? Like, and Kramer's like, but I'm just trying to be helpful, right?
Yeah.
So from a leadership perspective, it's recognizing that we are always on, right? People are always watching us, right? They're always, and humans, we're always judging one another, right? We're always being judged, whether we say we are judgmental or not, because our brain needs to make sense of what's going on. And from a leadership perspective, to your question, I think it's just appreciating that what we might think as a leader is clear and well understood, and the intent of that is understood. It's going to be interpreted like 20 different ways by everybody that's there, and every single person is going to have a slightly different interpretation of
Yeah.
what we've done or what we've said.
Yeah. And I wonder what you think about. So I remember years ago, I was in college, and there were some of my classmates, they were talking about, I think in this class, I was like one of 2 or 3 guys. And the girls were kind of talking about like, yeah, I just say what I say. And if somebody has a problem with what I'm saying, that's on them. And I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if this sits right. Because to a degree, I get it, but I wanted to stand up and say, well, I think everybody in this class who's not a man is not as smart as me. If you get mad about it, that's on you. And to prove a point, like, no, like what I said was dumb. Like, there should maybe be some thought into what we say. Because I always say, like, I think communication, if we treated communication like anything else, like if somebody asked me to build them a birdhouse and I just was like, whatever, I just threw some stuff together. I was like, here, you get the point of it. They'd be like, no, that's not what I picked up. No, that's terrible. And I think we do that with communication, where it's just like, you need a nose job. There, you got it. You got the point. Let's just.
Well, the golden rule, right, is that we
Mhm.
treat others as we would like to be treated. But I love the modification of that, which is treat others the way they want to be treated. And
Yeah.
so I think leadership is about being responsible for our impact.
Mhm.
We are responsible and accountable for our impact. And if the impact, to your point, Joe, is that I want to be authentic, right? And I want to be able to speak my truth, that's fine, right?
Mhm.
But are we also behaving in a way that aligns with our values?
Mhm.
Right. So if I have a value around mutual respect, integrity, um, is that being honored, right? In the way that I'm showing up and behaving, right? Because I
Yeah.
think that also needs to be considered as well when we're a leader, right?
Yeah.
And as a leader, we're in certain situations, we're setting an example.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And I love this concept of like speaking your truth, but also hearing the truth of others. Because one of my hopes of this podcast is to like talk about like talk about things in a non-threatening way.
Mhm.
Because it might be tough to talk about like, hey, you're selling drugs, but you could turn that into business or find a better way. That might be a tough conversation, but starting off with, oh my gosh, there was this hilarious episode of Seinfeld where Jerry got his car stolen and he calls, the guy answers, great conversation. And it's just like, man, that guy could have probably been a like great security salesman just doing this, and I think there's more of that in the world, and it just gives a nice like transition to talk. And I one of the guests I had on here, we were talking about truth, and he said sometimes I think people want to talk
Mm.
until they're right. But sometimes I think we should listen until we're right.
No, I
It's
think
like,
that's beautifully said. And I think there's one of the a session that I was at, because I always like to learn from other facilitators as
mhm,
well. And often what we'll do is set ground rules before we start working with a group. And one of the ground rules that they had was take space, but also give space,
mhm,
right? And sometimes I think, particularly now, when we talk a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's about sometimes we're calling out to call people in,
mhm,
right? So,
mhm.
um, absolutely, right? I think we are so geared to be right or to justify or to validate. And it's
Mhm.
like, what if we were actually okay with not being willing to be proven wrong, right?
Mm,
Because sometimes beliefs that we hold aren't validated, right?
yeah.
But right, because like, and Adam Grant has a great book on that. He talks
Yes.
about Think Again, right? Where
Yeah.
he points out some very common myths that people believe in,
Mm,
like the Salem witch hunts, where witches were hung and or burned, and he said actually
Yeah.
they were not because they were hung, right?
Yeah.
But people somehow believe they were all burned, right? Because
Yeah.
this
Right.
belief kept propagating itself.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And something else that just kind of clicked in my mind too, of Kramer in this situation was like, oh my gosh, but there might be another situation where his directness is actually welcomed. Like if somebody is just like eating really loud at a movie theater or somebody's talking, and for him just to be like, hey, you're really loud over there. Like then everybody would be like, oh my gosh, yes, thank you. And so I also think it's interesting how like a trait can in some lights be considered not okay, but in other traits, okay. I always tell the story I always tell. So my dad, me and my brother call him the gorilla because he was a construction worker. He's 6'2" and he's just built. And when he was really fit, he couldn't turn his neck. He would just so like a gorilla. And he was a pretty tough guy. He was, pretty rough around the edges. And there was a lot of times that wasn't helpful. But there was a time where somebody from her church, her husband was gone, and she took her car in, and they took her for all she was worth. They're like, oh, we can't let you drive unless you get this taken care of and this. And she didn't know any better. And so she told my dad, and when he saw everything they did, he was like, oh, no, they scammed you. So he goes down to the mechanic, and there's 3 guys there, and he's like, you need to give her money back. And they're like, no, we did the work. You have to go or else we'll throw you out. And he goes, you'll need more than 3 guys to throw me out. And they gave her money back. So in that light, great opportunity. So do you think like there's a sense of like knowing your lane as well and where to kind of step in? Or
Yeah, I would refer to that, Joe, as flexibility and adaptability. How do we flex and adapt in different situations, right? Meeting people where they are, right? If I know that this is somebody that I'm talking to is very sensitive about their appearance, I'm probably going to, right?
Yeah.
Think about how I'm going to modulate that message.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I would also say, Joe, is it is also about accepting people for who they are and how we can see the upside of that trait.
Yeah.
With a little bit of grace. That seems to be the
Mhm.
word we're using a lot, because your story about your dad reminded me of a situation that we had. My dad had to be in long-term care for a number of years.
Mhm.
And one of the and the way they were set up was they would always sit at the same table to
Mhm.
dine. And one of the gentlemen at as my dad's table was a retired plumber. And he'd started his own plumbing company, had been quite successful. His wife had passed away, and unfortunately he was having some health issues. So he was placed into a long-term care facility. But he used terms in reference to certain cultural groups that would now be considered politically incorrect, right? But he didn't mean anything by it, right? That was
Right.
the culture, like that was the environment that he grew up in, because he hired like a lot of indigenous people. He said he
Yeah.
used to hire a lot of them because he said, I didn't care. He said, as long as they'd be willing to work. We also know that he had a grandson who transitioned to a woman, right? And so obviously he still loved his granddaughter.
Mhm.
Um, but again, right, just like you said, might be a little bit rough around the edges, but the core of the individual was pure gold, because he would
Yeah.
always out for my dad, right?
Yeah.
And he was always like helping him, and he was like very, supportive. And so I think it's also important for us to really look beyond the exterior of somebody to who are they at their core, right? Do I see goodness, right? Do I see
Yeah.
kindness, right? Do I see light? Right?
Yeah. Right. I love that so much because that's one thing too I'm seeing a lot where it's so quick. What I'm seeing a lot is like if you like this media, you are not with us.
Mm,
And I'm like, oh man, you're that's just like cutting a lot of people off. And even with stuff that like I know a lot of people who I work with in the community, they don't do a lot of great things. They sometimes don't say great things. And I know it wouldn't get anywhere if I was like, I'm not going to be a part of this. I mean,
Mm.
obviously I'm not out there selling drugs or anything with them, but I always like the line, do I not vanquish my enemy when I make them my friend?
Mm.
And just to be able to help people get like, oh, well, here's probably why it's not the best idea to just come out and say, need a nose job. I get where you're coming from. But just that ability to look deeper. And another great conversation we had on here was about we love character development in shows, but we don't allow others in our life to have character development.
Mm.
It's kind of like, oh, you messed up, I'm done. You don't give them time to grow from that.
Yeah.
So
no, it's it's so very true, isn't it? We don't again, the word that keeps coming back to me is grace, Joe. We judge people on one particular interaction, right? One particular thing, and it just never goes away, right? Like that's just what we've decided, right? Is we have to be so firm in our judgment with that. And it's just like, well, we are all going to have like our days where we're off, right? Do we want to be judged by that,
Yeah.
right? Do we want to be written off by somebody just because I didn't get a good sleep, right? Like I had a situation where I was very harshly criticized after a online presentation that I did, and it was only one person, but it was really, really mean. Like it was like the point where this person said, "Oh, it's the worst facilitator I've ever seen. Don't ever hire her again." Right? No one else had said anything, and I was talking to my client because this was a participant that was serving the client that we were with. And, I said, it's really unfortunate because this is a person who's going to be in a leadership development program. Like, how are they going to be with their team if you have a team member who comes in, right, and has had an off day, right, or makes a mistake, right, or struggles with something, and you shared, which I think is courageous, that you've had your own history of mental health issues, right? Would that be fair, right? Because
right.
we're just human, right? And we're all going to be vulnerable, susceptible to things.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, I love that. And I think that's such a good reminder of, I hope none of us are judged for our weakest moment.
Mm,
So
yeah.
another good Ted Lasso line.
I got to watch that show.
Oh.
Everyone keeps talking to me about it. And I know the ship has sailed because the show is so
Yeah. Yes, it's a very close. I always say that's the closest character who I feel like I relate to the most. If I could only have a Southern accent,
Oh,
it'd be twins. So before we get to the questions, I got to ask you, is there anything we missed or anything you want to touch on with the clips we watched?
I think it's interesting because I think because there's so much emphasis on mental health and mental wellness,
Yes.
it's the overall theme of Seinfeld is a great reminder that so much of life we take so seriously that we get ourselves kind of into knots about it, right? And
Yeah.
it's just like, let some of that go. Like, just let it go, move on, have a good laugh, right? Because
Yeah.
I personally love British humor. Like it's dark, but it's because it makes light of those things that we make so like sacred, right? That we
Yeah.
don't to, right?
Yeah.
So, I think they're both really great illustrations
Yeah.
of if we can have that skill, it actually helps create resilience.
Yes, I love that. That's so good. And it reminds me of a Scrubs episode. And this is exactly why I started this podcast. Because there's this episode where a patient comes in, his fiance is like, hey, we're going to do something special tomorrow morning. and he thought his mind was in the gutter. So he took some happy pills and found out they were just going to brunch with her grandmother. And so, like, right when he went to give her grandma a hug, who was in a wheelchair, the pills kicked in. And when he went to back up, he accidentally took out her breathing apparatus. And when he came in, he told the story, everybody was laughing. Elliot was trying not to laugh. Everybody else was laughing. And she was like, oh, this is serious. And so she went in to try to talk to him, and then she lost and started laughing. And he was so like, oh, I can't, this happened. And she told a story of something really embarrassing that happened to her when she was younger, where she was in the bathroom. She was rollerblading, went into the bathroom, trying to put her pants up, but she rollerbladed accidentally out into the public. And she said the next day I came in with rollerblades, and everybody just kind of laughed. And like, I do love that. And I'm a huge believer. If I can laugh at myself, I can dictate the laugh.
Yeah.
And it just makes it better. So I love that point. I think you're so dead on. Anything else you want to cover?
No, it's been, I mean, I've really enjoyed this, and I love that we can create from anything.
Yes, exactly.
From, the world around us, and dig into it and have
Yes.
conversation.
Yeah.
Because I think the art of conversation is also dying, right? We're just
Yeah.
so distracted with our devices. And so I love that there's just this opportunity to connect with somebody and talk about something we both like, right?
Yeah.
And enjoy.
Exactly. Okay, so I ask all my guests 3 questions. The first question is, which clip did you think was funnier? And a tie is an acceptable answer.
I'm gonna go with the nose job.
Yeah, me too. I think just everybody's reactions, but it was a tough choice. I love the first clip too, but yeah, just the second question is, which clip did you think we got more meaningful conversation out of?
I think it was the second one again, right?
Yeah.
Because we kind of were able to really explore some nuances of nature, even tied it to leadership, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, we got a lot of mileage out of that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, agreed. And this is kind of more the norm, where like first one's like the warm up, and then the second clip, you're like, we're in it, we got it. And then it's just more natural. And then the final question is, if we had to do a deep dive, just analyze every little thing, and I mean everything, which clip would you want to analyze?
I think I would still go for the second one.
Yeah.
I think we'll pull that apart in terms of like, why did this person react this way, or what was this person thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I might go with the second one. Yeah, yes, I will go with the second one as well. So now what I'd love is, I just want to give you an opportunity, just kind of talk about what you got going on, where people can find you, and anything else that's close to your heart.
Wow. Oh, thank you so much for that. So what I'm really excited about, Joe, is right now I'm working on a program that's going to allow people who are not yet leaders, that want to really build their leadership capacity, to start getting those foundational pieces that will help them to succeed and grow as leaders. And I built this on, and this is all brand new, so I'm sharing this because I worked on it last night. It's based on something that I did many years ago with another not-for-profit organization that was helping kids that were from immigrant families that were new to Canada, with different bridging programs. And while I was with that organization, they talked about actually pre-K programs. So there's some in the education system. A lot of this was actually done in the US, actually, interestingly enough. where they started pre-K programs. So even before kids went to kindergarten, they were starting with programs that would get kids reading, right? Doing some interactive stuff like learning. And this is my idea is there's this approach to leadership called emergent leadership. And this is sort of a very informal type of leadership where if you think about your own career, in a group, there would always be those kind of people that would surface as a leader, right? Hey, we need to, right? We are going to do a charity drive
Yeah.
for United Way, right? Oh, like Joe and Bob or Joan step up, right? Those people that kind of naturally rise to being leadership, to taking on leadership roles. And often they influence others, right? Because they're saying, hey, this is what we need to do, or this is a change we could do in our team. So I want to support those people to start to actually get some foundational skills of leadership so that they become the next generation of leader. And in the capacity that they're in now, they can support managers and leaders because I think workloads, the amount of stress that's in organizations is increasing.
Yeah.
And so this could actually help offload some of that.
Mm.
And it's also about building capacity within the organization to
Yeah.
more leaders. So that's my project. And
Yeah.
I'm looking to launch that in the fall. It'll be a 6-month interactive, immersive experience where it's going to be virtual, in person. They'll have a capstone project,
Yeah.
have opportunity for reflection, building a
Mhm.
reflective practice as they go through it. And then the participants will become a cohort that supports each other as they go through their leadership
Oh,
journey.
that's so awesome. I love that so much because I think having that, why that touches my heart is part of my recovery was I was working at a as a production worker, and I had some managers come in and they saw something in me I didn't see in me. And through their support, they're teaching me about leaders. I became a manager. And for me, and I always talk about like, I wanted to use my story of, when I was hospitalized, I had to take off my shoelaces because I couldn't even be trusted with my shoelaces.
Yeah.
To now I'm leading a 3-department company. And so I love what you're doing because I think that will give people who maybe are scared to get into leadership that opportunity to come and see they can do it. They do have that capability. So I just love that. I'm so happy you're doing that.
Yeah. And I want to start early, Joe, before, like, let's not assume just because somebody's junior in their career that they're not ready for that.
Yeah.
Because I think if you have that desire, you
Mhm.
have that motivation, um, I can help people to develop that, right?
Yeah.
I can help them just understand themselves better. And I can also provide information for them to understand some of the theory, right? But then also practice it. And I think absolutely, like you had some great mentors and leaders, right? That saw that and
Mhm.
were willing to help you succeed.
Yeah. That's awesome. And then where can people find you? Like if they want to look you up on social media or anything like that?
Yeah, so I hang out on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. Got a website under construction, but
Yeah.
best place to find me is I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Instagram. Those are kind of my two main platforms, but I also am on Facebook as well with my business page, Lisa Darr and Associates.
Mhm. That's awesome. The challenge I've been giving my listeners is I talked about this for the first time in my season 1 wrap up. And I talked about I was at a park and I was walking down the sidewalk and somebody had written, "All I see in the world is hate. Please do something about it." And I wanted to write "Together We Can." And like this, you're talking about making a better tomorrow for leadership. And so this is an opportunity we can stand against the hate. And, so like if you're interested in leader, you know somebody who wants to be in a leader, but not sure where to start, you got somebody right here who you can reach out to. And Lisa's been very like lovely to talk to. I talked to her a little bit before we started, and you're getting the same Lisa before and after. I always say, like, I was always curious listening to podcasts. I'm like, are they different when the mics are off? But no, this is Lisa. So yeah, absolute pleasure to have you on. Love for you to come back in the future. Just so grateful for you taking the time.
Well, I would love to, Joe, and I just wanted to acknowledge what you're doing, the passion that you have for this, and I can see that you have a real strong stake in what you're doing, and that's the sign of a leader, right? We have our stakes of things that are so vitally important that we have to get it out there.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate you and what you're doing. And it's amazing, right? We can be total strangers, and by the end of a conversation,
Yes.
we're connected,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's the cool thing about technology now, right? Is that's the
Agreed.
beautiful thing.
Using it for good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Well, thank you again, and everybody else. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.